Gene Carbonell, Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
My question is, how has the war on terror impacted the Freedom of Information Act requests?
Well, you know, I hate to sound cynical.
Oh, please do.
You know, because I was trying so hard to kind of, change my image and come across as cheerful. No, the Freedom of Information Act, the federal act, it was bad before Bush got in. It's a lot worse now. And there's, I think, a lot more open contempt. And it's frustrating that a lot of people think of, well, Freedom of Information Act, that's simply like a special interest for journalists. I mean, so many people don't give a darn that they have no idea how the government's using the power over them. And it's been a number of the Freedom of Information Act requests which were answered in part, which have alerted people to there are far greater abuses going on now. But I've written a little bit about that. It didn't do any good. And Congress has passed a law to improve how that would be handled, but there's one senator who's put a secret block on the law going on the bill becoming law. And with the way the Senate works, it's possible for that one senator to do that secretly, and we have no idea which U.S. senator has sabotaged making the Freedom of Information Act work a little bit better. I mean, this is the kind of thing that could make people lose faith in Congress.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
I'm John Walsh. I'm from Cambridge, Mass. And since it did come up, I'm a member of the ACLU. But I'd like to ask you why you think the libertarian outlook hasn't been more at the forefront of the anti-war movement. I think that the libertarian point of view has a great hold and a great credibility on the American populace, but many people who don't regard themselves as liberals don't know and don't know about this and don't have anyone to follow in opposing the war.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I've been surprised that the libertarian message and movement has not resonated far more broadly with the anti-war efforts. There's a wonderful website, antiwar.com. Their chief columnist is speaking here tomorrow, I think, and those folks do great work. But the anti-war message has been almost entirely from the liberal left, and I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, there are editors which I've worked with that seem almost not that comfortable with the fact that I would be very critical of Bush, but yet I would not be in favor of the Democrats. They seem really perplexed by that. And I think part of the trouble is that the editors, what do I say in public? I mean, there are, I think the older generation of editors had a better understanding of how the libertarian message fit in. I mean, it was partly Ronald Reagan, at least before he became president, sounded fairly libertarian at times. And I think that word may have had more resonance with people, 15 or 20 years ago. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But I think part of the reason is that parts of the libertarian movement were in favor of the war. There were folks at Cato that were very, very openly in favor of the war. Some of the people at Reason Magazine were openly in favor of the war. People like at the Independent Institute, Bumper, Mises Institute, those folks were all staunchly against the war and never wavered or flinched. But Cato and Reason probably have a little more visibility than some of the vehemently anti-war folks. But I've asked myself that question, and I don't have a good answer. So, yeah.
Sam Bostaff, University of Dallas. I'm a libertarian who has cooperated with the anti-war movement, and I can speak to that point.
Okay.
And I would say one of the things that one has to do is bite one's tongue when you're around progressive Democrats and the other liberals in the anti-war movement, because so many of their other positions are so repugnant to libertarian views, and it's difficult to fit in. So you have to focus on that one issue, anti-war or pro-peace, and write and speak to that issue along with them as comrades for that one issue. So it's an ad hoc
Yeah,
alliance.
Good
And
advice.
I think a lot of libertarians are unwilling to do that because you do have to mingle and you have to listen to things you don't want to hear.
it drives me to drink. Yeah,
I was wondering about the American public being all that. I thought I was, okay. With regard to a choice between civil liberties and continued existence, which a lot of people perceive, whether it's correct or not, as immaterial, choosing continued existence is not a stupid choice.
if you trust the government to give you honest
I
information.
understand.
Yeah.
I understand. That's
Hell of a
big-
caveat.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I'll grant that. Where was I going with this?
I didn't mean to interrupt, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. With regard to committing torture, I can envision hypotheticals under which I would do it. Were I structuring a society and writing laws, I would certainly outlaw it. Would I always abide by those laws? I don't think so. With
So-
regard to
so-
hypotheticals, I'm interested, have you ever thought of a circumstance under which you would commit torture?
Well, I have worked with some editors that were late in paying.
Well, there's a good example, I suppose. All right, well, in
Just
any
a hint,
case, I think
just a
one
hint,
can-
Bumper.
I think one can be reasonable, and I think one can envision circumstances where one would do that.
Okay, I mean, this is, it's interesting how there's that faith in the hypothetical. Because the first, way back in my youth, I used to write about agriculture policy. And it was funny, it was fun to see how congressmen and agriculture economists would have these very complex models. And they would prove that if these 27 things all happen this way, that government intervention would be a net benefit to society. As long as all these 27 things happen the same way. And even if someone did write a proposal like that, it would go before the House Agriculture Committee, and some congressman would say, yeah, well, it's important to double the money for my farmers. And boom, it's all out the window. With torture policy, you have people talking about, the ticking time bomb scenario, but who is tortured and why? If you look at the history of recent U.S. policy, you have people, there was a taxi cab driver who was nabbed in Afghanistan. There's now an award-winning movie about his case. He was nabbed out there. He was wrongly suspected of being a terrorist, and what the U.S. agents did was hang him up and beat him to death. And I don't know what information that they were thinking of, but there was never any reason to first even arrest the guy, much less interrogate him, much less beat him to death. This is at Bagram Air Force Base. This is the same place that Cheney visited last year, and there was a bomb that went off a mile away from him, so he was treated like a combat veteran when he got back.
I know it's hard to believe that government would misuse its power.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
What can you tell us about the executive orders that Bush has signed recently, particularly regarding the National Guard and his being able to take that over?
well, thanks for asking. I did an article for American Conservative magazine last month on that. I've got a link to that at my website, jimbovard.com. Congress passed a provision in a Defense Authorization Act last September, which basically made it far easier for the president to declare martial law. As I asked in the article, how many pipe bombs does it take to end American democracy? A lot fewer than it did a year ago.